For nearly a century, Tutankhamun's golden mask distracted us from a darker mystery. A boy king who ruled briefly, died suddenly, and left behind more questions than answers. Poison, murder, curses. Every theory had believers. But the truth wasn't buried in the tomb. It was locked inside his body. When scientists finally analyzed Tutankhamun's DNA, the results didn't just explain how he lived or how he died. They exposed the hidden cost of royal bloodlines and shattered the legend built around him. The story we were told doesn't survive the science, and what the evidence reveals is far more unsettling. Wonderful things, dark questions. For more than 3,000 years, Tutankhamun was sealed in darkness, buried under sand, hidden behind gold, and almost erased from memory. He wasn't remembered like the great builders or conquerors. His reign was short. He took the throne when he was barely 9, and he died before he reached 20. That should have made him a footnote. Instead, he became the face of ancient Egypt. It happened in 1922, when British archaeologist Howard Carter, funded by Lord Carnarvon, kept digging in the Valley of the Kings after most experts thought the big discoveries were over. This place had been raided for centuries. Tombs stripped, walls scarred, hope thinned out. But Carter found an entrance buried under rubble. He made a small hole, held up a candle, and someone asked if he could see anything. His answer became a permanent line in history. Yes, wonderful things. And inside, the tomb of Tutankhamun, catalogued as K562, was nearly intact. It wasn't a massive monument. It was small for a king, and that detail immediately felt like a clue, like something about his death and burial didn't go according to plan. But the preservation was unreal. Gold-covered shrines, alabaster statues, jeweled collars, weapons, chariots, furniture, packed so tight it felt like time had been trapped in a room. Then came the image that burned itself into the world. The funerary mask, gold and inlaid stones. Newspapers ran wild. Photos spread everywhere. Tut wasn't just discovered, he was reborn as a modern obsession. And then the story grew teeth. Lord Carnarvon died suddenly only months after the tomb's opening, and rumors of a curse exploded. Strange accidents, mysterious illnesses, punishment from beyond the grave. Scientists called it superstition, but the fear only made the mystery louder. Because once the glitter fades, the questions hit hard. Why was his tomb so small? Why did he die so young? Why did history nearly lose him? And the one that turns treasure into a thriller. What was happening inside the boy king's body? Here's the twist. Tut's life sits in the middle of a national upheaval. His father, Pharaoh Akhenaten, had tried to overturn centuries of religion, closing temples, suppressing old gods, and elevating Aten as the sole deity. After Akhenaten died, the kingdom was left in chaos, and a child inherited a fractured world. Even Tut's name became a clue. He started as Tutankhaten, living image of Aten, and then, as traditional worship returned, he became Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. That's a public pivot carved into identity itself. But the records stay frustratingly vague about the most personal part, his family ties. After Tut died, the bloodline looked fragile. 2 stillborn daughters were found buried with him, and no heirs survived. His widow, Ankhesenamun, also his half-sister, wrote an extraordinary letter to a foreign king asking for one of his sons to marry her and rule Egypt, a letter preserved in the Hittite archives. That alone tells you how unstable the moment felt. Now go back to the body. When Carter unwrapped the mummy in the 1920s, it wasn't delicate. The methods caused damage. Broken bones, scorched wrappings. Early researchers noted what looked like a fracture at the back of the skull, and that single detail became a time bomb for decades of debate. Then, in the early 2000s, CT scans started rewriting the story. The skull fracture looked like it happened after death, possibly from rough handling or chemical reactions from the resin used in burial. The dramatic chariot crash idea also weakened when researchers argued the injuries didn't fit. So if the old stories aren't solid, what is? That's when scientists stopped chasing rumors and went after the one thing Tut couldn't hide. Okay, but can we prove it? DNA exposes the bloodline. DNA is the tool the transcript treats as the turning point from debate to test. DNA testing was chosen because ancestry could be checked through genetic comparisons, not vague inscriptions. DNA work was authorized in the early 2000s when Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities approved a major DNA study of royal mummies. DNA work was dangerous because contamination from modern handlers could ruin any sample. DNA work was hard because genetic material in ancient bone can degrade, and a lab can't invent genes that aren't there. DNA sampling from Tut's remains had extra risk because earlier handling damaged bone and disturbed the body. DNA analysis also had to account for resin and deterioration, because contamination can mix into the sample and confuse results. DNA teams worked under strict conditions because contamination is the silent killer of any test. DNA teams gathered a genetic sample from other mummies thought to be in the same bloodline. DNA teams included the younger lady because her identity mattered to the ancestry map. DNA teams also included the mummy widely believed to be Akhenaten because you can't confirm parentage without genetic comparisons. DNA progress was slow, and the transcript admits the beginning was a mess. DNA became usable when researchers cleaned out the samples and got really pure DNA. DNA purity matters because contamination can imitate ancestry and fake relationships. DNA purity matters because with ancient material, one bad sample can poison the whole result. Scan evidence was already changing the story before the DNA results arrived. Scan evidence from the early 2000s suggested the skull fracture happened after death, which weakens a fatal blow claim on a skull level. Scan evidence also challenged the chariot explanation because the injury pattern was described as inconsistent. Scan evidence added a new baseline. This was a frail body with symptoms, not a sturdy young ruler. Bone evidence included a clubfoot, which would make walking painful. Bone evidence also stacked up as brittle bones, bone disease, and congenital disorder in the transcript's description. Bone evidence connected to the walking sticks found in the tomb as a trait clue, not just a royal accessory. Bone weakness changes how you interpret any injury, because fragile bone can break in ways that mislead. Disease evidence entered through DNA with malaria described in his system. Disease plus bone disorder raises the risk of a slow collapse, not a single dramatic event. Disease doesn't need a conspiracy, it just needs a vulnerable body and bad timing. Disease also fits the transcript's idea that his health was already precarious. Bloodline became the next question because the transcript ties genetic symptoms to dynasty practice. Bloodline in a royal dynasty could be shaped by inbreeding, because close marriages repeat the same genes. Inbreeding increases the chance that harmful disorder shows up, because bad traits have fewer places to hide. Dynasty purity, as framed, can create genetic vulnerability, even when the dynasty looks powerful. DNA results were announced in 2010, and the transcript presents them as stunning. DNA results identified Tut as the son of Akhenaten, anchoring him to that dynasty line. DNA results also said his mother was Akhenaten's sister, making the bloodline a brother union. DNA results offered a blunt explanation for why genetic disorder could concentrate inside one body. Genetic implications show up when you match symptoms to ancestry. Genetic vulnerability can align with congenital disorder, a clubfoot, and brittle bone signs described by scan. Genetic vulnerability can also explain why disease like malaria could hit harder. Genetic vulnerability is also used to frame the tragedy of his two stillborn daughters found buried with him, as part of a wider bloodline fragility. DNA and the genetic record can support this. His body showed symptoms, disease was present, and his ancestry came from a close inbreeding loop inside the dynasty. DNA and the genetic record still can't prove one single dramatic moment of death beyond a vulnerable biological setup. Now here's where the theories take over, beyond the DNA. Curses, crashes, conspiracies. One theory is that people wanted murder because a king dying young feels like a plot, and speculation loves a villain. Another theory is that the skull detail became the perfect seed for debate, because one sharp clue can overshadow a whole lifetime of uncertainty. If you already believe ancient courts were full of ambition, then if a boy king dies fast, then it's easy to assume someone helped it happen. Another theory is the chariot crash story, because it could turn his death into a single cinematic instant, and that kind of story spreads. That theory survived because the debate didn't require certainty, it only required a picture viewers could remember. And if that picture fades, speculation usually grabs for something even darker. Then there's the curse theory, and it might be the most contagious one. The curse theory fed off timing, because Lord Carnarvon died suddenly after the tomb was opened, and superstition could connect those dots. Once that curse theory exists, every illness or accident could be made to fit, because fear isn't evidence and it doesn't need proof. If you believe the tomb was protected, then if bad things follow, then the curse feels confirmed. There's also a theory about the tomb itself. Maybe the small size implies the burial was rushed, and that implies something went wrong quickly. That theory keeps returning because it turns architecture into motive, and motive into mystery. And the more you focus on why small, the more the theory makes the whole dynasty look unstable. Another debate sits on identity, theories about whether Nefertiti was his mother, because her shadow hangs over the Amarna period, and speculation wants her placed in the center. That debate grows when records feel vague, because uncertainty invites people to fill gaps with meaning. And when the transcript says scholars argued for decades, it implies the puzzle was never going to stay quiet. And as Graham Hancock has often said, history holds secrets we are not told, which fuels speculation when the record goes silent. There's also speculation around the widow move, because that Hittite letter feels like a flare shot into the night. If a queen is begging for a foreign prince, then if the dynasty was stable, then why would she do it? That's why the debate doesn't end. It suggests fear, urgency, and a royal line that didn't trust itself. And then the transcript drops the wildest speculation right up front, the ancient astronauts theory. That theory suggests mummification might have been taught as a way to preserve genetic information in DNA, like the body was a vault. If you accept that speculation, then if DNA is the key, then the whole tomb becomes less a grave and more a message. The boy behind the gold. Strip away the noise, and the transcript leaves you with a brutal human story. Tutankhamun was a child king in a fractured era, born into the aftermath of Akhenaten's religious revolution, then pushed into a public restoration. He even carried that reversal in his name, shifting from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun as the old gods returned. Then he died before 20, and his memory nearly faded, until 1922, when Carter opened a nearly intact tomb, and the world fell in love with the mask. The discovery also sparked fear, especially after Lord Carnarvon died suddenly, and the curse rumors caught fire. But the real tension came from the body. Early unwrapping damaged the mummy. A skull fracture launched decades of arguments. Later, CT scans pushed back. The fracture looked post-death, and other dramatic explanations weakened too. Then science went after ancestry and health. Researchers fought contamination, pulled out really pure DNA, and in 2010 announced a family claim that reframed everything. Tut was said to be Akhenaten's son, and his mother was Akhenaten's sister. In the transcripts telling, that bloodline detail connects to a frail body, clubfoot, bone disease, congenital defects, and disease like malaria. So the boy behind the gold isn't just mystery and treasure. He's a real person whose life was shaped by dynasty choices long before he was born, and whose death helped collapse a line that couldn't produce a surviving heir. So, what do you think matters more here? The theories people cling to, or the family secret the transcript says the evidence revealed? Drop your take in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.